Hello, my name is Braxton Chan, and in this video, I will discuss the etiology of Alzheimer's and the complexity of doing neuroscience research. The cause of Alzheimer's disease have been unclear and up for debate even after decades of research. A significant reason for this is how the disease differs from person to person. In other words, observations for one patient may not be observed for another. An additional barrier is one brain region is not related to a single function, and there are countless pathways that connect different regions all over the brain. Researchers have to decide if it is beneficial to study a small topic of a function or disorder, such as the specific cells involved, or focus on the function or disorder in its entirety, such as the brain regions involved and how they interact with each other and the body. Both of these approaches have their advantages and disadvantages. While smaller areas of research allow for in-depth understandings of individual mechanisms at play, they may miss the countless others and how their interactions manifest in a disorder. Focusing on a broader area allows researchers to not miss out on these other mechanisms. However, trying to consider every mechanism will take a lot of time and money, and therefore researchers cannot go into depth in these areas, and they can miss out on key details that may have a major role in the disease. A balance has to be decided by researchers how in-depth they should go and how many aspects of the disease they want to incorporate into their research. These problems in neuroscience are not confined to just diseases. Take language function, for example. It was thought that language tasks, such as passive listening and word generation tasks, were localized to the dominant hemisphere on the left side. However, as you can see in these fMRI scans, there is activation in the non-dominant hemisphere on the right side. The models trying to explain the processing that goes on in the brain where language tasks are performed are insufficient and fail to consider many other components, such as subcortical structures and their connections. As I will highlight throughout this video, a limited understanding of cortical processes is a common difficulty in neuroscience. Let's take a look at Alzheimer's disease, the most common degenerative disease of the nervous system. Current diagnosis focuses on the dementia aspect of symptoms, including memory testing, problem-solving skills, and attention. There is no solid explanation for how Alzheimer's develops in people. But here are three major theories of pathogenesis that hypothesize how this may occur. The first theory I will discuss is the amyloid cascade hypothesis, which states that the accumulation of amyloid beta in the brain causes a sequence of events that ultimately lead to the development of Alzheimer's. This theory is based on research that focuses on tissue and genetic evidence related to Alzheimer's. The discovery that patients with Alzheimer's have a high composition of amyloid beta in their brains, that Alzheimer's could be inherited in an autosomal dominant fashion, and that an autosomal dominant mutation could cause Alzheimer's are major supporters of the theory. These genetic factors may be the cause for this change in the brain composition. However, this theory fails to explain the interaction between amyloid beta and tau. Tau has its own degenerative role in the disorder, and not considering it means you are missing a major part of how Alzheimer's develops and an area that could be researched for further treatments. The amyloid cascade hypothesis is a promising theory. However, the current research is still very preliminary with few test subjects. Further research still has to be done to include all the unique patient presentations. For example, there are people who don't develop Alzheimer's that have been observed to have high levels of amyloid beta, which does seem to refute this theory. It may be possible that the amyloid beta cascade is only valid for specific patients, and therefore other theories have to be considered to explain these other observations. The next theory I will discuss is the tau hypothesis, which states tau aggregation in the brain causes a sequence of events that ultimately lead to the development of Alzheimer's. Tau is a microtubular associated protein and is involved with the stability of tubulin assembly. When tau is hyperphosphorylated, the stability is lost and the microtubular subunits fall apart. Therefore, the axonal transport system, the cytoskeletal system, the signaling system, and the mitochondrial integrity are negatively affected. These factors contribute to neurodegeneration and, according to this theory, the development of Alzheimer's. Tangled clumps of tau proteins are then observed since they are no longer bounded to microtubules. Similar to the previous theory, the tau hypothesis fails to consider tau's interactions with amyloid beta. The most prominent problem with this lack of consideration is amyloid beta accumulation precedes tau accumulation, potentially by years. Therefore, it is difficult to conclude that tau induces the development of Alzheimer's. Focusing research and treatments on only tau and amyloid beta accumulations mean you are not taking into consideration Alzheimer's in its entirety. Similar to what I discussed for language, if you focus on just one hemisphere at a time, you are missing functions in the other hemisphere. There may be other factors at play for Alzheimer's that are not related to defining characteristics of Alzheimer's. For example, the inflammation hypothesis focuses on the interactions between neurons and glial cells. Glial cells, such as microglia and astrocytes, contribute to the maintenance of brain homeostasis, neurosurvival, and cognitive functions. The activation of these cells characterizes neuroinflammation. This theory hypothesizes that it is the chronic persistence of this inflammation response in the brain that leads to the development of Alzheimer's. Research shows glial cells respond to amyloid beta and tau proteins by activating the inflammatory response. This may help validate the amyloid cascade hypothesis, as this theory shows it is not just the presence of amyloid beta in the brain that causes the development of Alzheimer's, but it is the brain's reaction to it that may lead to the development. This theory also does not solely focus on amyloid beta, but also considers tau proteins, and incorporates important observations that are not explained by the first two hypotheses. The variety of these three hypotheses highlights the complexity of determining the cause of a neurodegenerative disease. It is most likely that a single theory will not be sufficient for explaining an entire disorder. Rather, it may be a mix of old and new theories, and it could even be a different mix of theories depending on the individual. Other neurodegenerative disorders are proving to be no easier than Alzheimer's to figure out their causes and why they develop. Parkinson's disease also has no obvious causes, and once again, the development of this disease seems to vary from person to person. It may be related to a genetic mutation, environmental cause, brain trauma, tumors, and so on. No topic in neuroscience is straightforward. You have to take into consideration the entire body to get a true understanding of a function and a disease. Understanding the development of diseases and disorders is important because this will determine how prevention factors and treatments should be developed. Research has to persevere the lack of conclusions for how disease begins and progresses to help develop specific prevention measures and treatments to eventually help the millions of individuals and families suffering from neurodegenerative diseases all over the world. Thank you for listening.